For years, Bob Avakian has been sharply calling out woke identity politics for its denial of objective reality, for the way it has people caught up in canceling each other or seeking to hide in safe spaces, or to get in on this system rather than fighting to get rid of this system through a real revolution. And for the first time in a major way, the RevComs took this analysis to the public square last Wednesday night. Over 125 students, professors, and others turned out at UCLA to hear Sunsara Taylor speak on woke lunacy versus real revolution. The evening was electrifying. Sunsara was taking on all comers. This was just the beginning of what needs to impact throughout society. And our plan, with your help, is to take this much further.
Last week on this show, we broadcast for the full episode, a special episode that shared my full presentation at UCLA, Woke Lunacy versus Real Revolution. And it was a thrilling evening. It was very, like you said, it was electric in the auditorium. In my presentation, which laid the foundation for a really pretty rich, wild, and woolly question and answer that followed, I got into 4 major questions. 1. Does each different identity group, and even each different individual, have their own truth? Or is there one unified objective reality that all of us can come to understand using the tools of science? 2. Is the problem in society marginalization, or is it oppression? And why does this matter? 3. Is cancel culture a tool that empowers the powerless? Or is it a grotesque expression of the values of this dog-eat-dog system and the profoundly lowered sights of those who cannot see beyond it? And 4, should our goal be to guard ourselves with trigger warnings and safe spaces within this monstrous system? Or do we all need to get out of our comfort zones and put it on the line to make a revolution, to get to a society and a world where all of humanity, oppressed humanity everywhere, can finally live safely? And I got into a number of other things as well. And like I said, this laid a foundation for a very rich exchange and also contention. So in the room, we kind of had a microcosm of what goes on in society. We had folks who came who are really indoctrinated in the woke outlook, and they came to try to poke holes in what I was presenting, what we were presenting. You had a pathetic band of counter-revolutionaries wrapping themselves, cloaking themselves in wokeness, who came in and tried to disrupt the event and then fled. You had a crew of MAGA morons, like fascist youth, spewing misogyny and anti-communism, a really ugly band of them. And then you had the majority of the audience who was there, who were very serious, very curious, wanted to hear a serious presentation on what is the problem in society and how do we get out of this?
Yeah, and I think in terms of these 2 polls that you had in the classroom, in terms of the Republican fascist students on the one hand and these wokesters on the other hand arguing for identity politics and all this, that really did typify what, exists in the larger society, and way too much sets the terms, the way that this fascism is getting more and more lunatic, and same with this woke thing, and they're clashing, but they're all also reinforcing each other and feeding each other while they're clashing. And people are just being paralyzed and suffocated in the face of this, decent people, right? But what was so significant about this event, unlike what happens all too often in the larger society, is that, you cut through all this, and really fought for a whole different, and led the audience down a whole different path. First of all, just completely demolishing this woke identity politics and, really taking on those Republican fascists and just deflating them. They were all puffed up and everything, and we'll see some of this in a minute when we show the Q&A. But, really bringing alive what's the fundamental problem in this society in terms of this system of capitalism, imperialism, and what's the real solution, and particularly, giving life to the Constitution for the new Socialist Republic written by Bob Czechoslovakian. So, this was so exciting, and it was also a great learning experience for everyone in the audience to see this clash of ideas.
Yeah, so tonight and over the next couple of episodes, we're going to be sharing large portions of the Q&A that followed the presentation. And tonight we want to start with a really important question that came up about science and what it means to be scientific.
Hey, I didn't come here with an agenda. I'm just a little bit disappointed with a couple of things, and I want to address it super calmly. I think you build a foundation of your speech on working against identity politics. Mm-hmm. Yet, I think so conveniently, and it was kind of ignorant, that all of your examples of oppression or people going through struggle were all from the black community. So if you could so conveniently use one specific ethnicity to kind of propagate your ideals, is that not identity politics in itself? That's my first question. My second question is, you spoke about how the upward mobility of certain people in marginalized communities doesn't matter because they're kind of still propagating like these oppressive structures. But since you're so empathetic to the rights and the ways that black people feel, are you disregarding the kind of role models that Nelson Mandela was, or like Martin Luther King was, or even like a Jay-Z was, right? Like people that made progress in their communities and inspired people to do better are somehow not appreciated now because they're like fulfilling some oppressor's needs, which didn't make sense to me. I feel like, yes, there's a lot of stupidity on the far left that needs to be addressed, but fighting it with more stupidity is not going to help, right? We need to fight with compromise and reason, and just throwing the word science around doesn't make it rational. It's just like, I'm sorry if this sounds offensive, but I study science and engineering, and nothing was scientific in the first half of the conversation. It was just, I'm going to abuse the fact that one certain community went through a lot of bad things in my country, and I'm going to use that to kind of propagate what I feel about them, right? Which sounded a little ignorant in my opinion. So I just want to know your views on that.
Well, let me start with your first question, which is that you allege I only spoke about what black people face in this society, and that's a form of identity politics. In fact, it is not. First of all, I spoke about the Bangladeshi women in the sweatshops sewing our clothes. I talked about women who've been forced to have children against their will in that form of enslavement. I spoke about trans people who have faced over 500 laws this year introduced or passed, not to mention the terror that's enforced against them. I spoke about what happens on this planet as a whole as it is heating due to the destruction of climate change driven forward by the system of capitalism, imperialism. So if you missed all that, I'm not surprised if you also missed some of the scientific undergirdings of it. But to be fair, I will walk through it again. I speak about black people in a very pronounced way when we come to revolution, because the exploitation, the enslavement, the dehumanization, and the degradation that's been inflicted on black people is foundational to this society and this system. And that is scientifically a fact. It's evidence-based. The wealth of this country, the territorial reach of this country, the military strength of this country got its roots in American slavery, the chattel slavery of black people. And then on that foundation, the ideology of white supremacy, of black inferiority, was propagated. It was made a bedrock of one of the glues of this society, and it has been woven into this society ever since. The forms of oppression have changed. It took a civil war to end slavery, but then what happened? After not even 10 years of Reconstruction, where black people were brought into some rights within this country, that was betrayed. The troops were pulled out, and black people were re-enslaved in new conditions, slavery by another name, sharecropping for generations, serf-like conditions enforced through terror, lynch mob terror and violence. And the troops were pulled out to go and finish off the extermination of the native peoples. Okay? Then another generation comes up in the face of changes in the U.S. economy and the need to pull black people out of the South and into the factories. Black people stood up and they waged struggle in a civil rights movement. They gave their lives. They stood up. White people stood with them. They went down from the north and stood with them. This upended Jim Crow. It was heroic that many did just unbelievably brave things. And then that was dismantled. And what did this system come back with? A new Jim Crow of mass incarceration that has ground up millions of black lives. So when I tell the story, this is science. When I tell the story of a black woman in Harlem with binoculars next to her window, watching in terror every time her 12-year-old, 13-year-old son crosses the street because of what police do every day to black people. Every fucking day. When I talk about that, that is a particular that concentrates a huge reality that is defining to this country. And that's scientifically true. It's evidence-based. It's woven into the fabric of this society. It's culture, it's economics, and it's global reach. And so we could debate. If you want to argue that's not scientific, bring some evidence. If you didn't hear the science, then please. No, go ahead. Go ahead. Tell me that it's a marginal thing. Tell me that to talk about that, I'm pimping off of it. I'm acknowledging reality. You want to say it's not defining to this country, that we shouldn't talk about it?
I want you to talk about it.
I am talking about it, yeah.
Okay, so just the fact that something actually happened or is true,
Yeah.
doesn't, anything that's empirically based is not science, right? It's like saying anything that's true is scientifically, like, it's science. It's not. So I understand.
Okay. Okay. Let me help. Oh, go ahead. Maybe he should get the mic.
I understand that your point is I want to be building arguments based on reason and rationale.
Here, take the mic just so it gets.
I understand that your point is I want to be building arguments on reason and rationale, but that doesn't mean that it's scientific, and that doesn't mean that it's false or wrong.
Okay.
I'm saying that the validity of your argument doesn't increase by throwing the word science out. Is all I'm trying to say.
Okay, so I would argue that science actually can be applied to all of reality, not just narrowly in engineering or in the natural sciences. No, this is important. What you're raising is widely felt, it's widely believed, it's widely taught, I'm sure, on this campus, that you can apply science to medicine, to nature, to the natural world. There's the hard sciences, but when you get to social reality, it's just opinions, it's experience, whatever. No. You can apply science to everything. Everything that is part of reality, which societies are, can be analyzed scientifically. Yeah. All science means, in a universal sense, is it's an evidence-based process. You gather evidence about reality, and you look for the deeper causes of the patterns in reality. And you can apply that to a society, just like you can apply it to a rainforest, just like you can apply it to a virus. You can say, what is the most defining thing about any given society? What undergirds it? What are the laws and its functioning? And a scientific analysis of this society says the most defining thing about this country is it's a capitalist, imperialist mode of production. That all of our needs are met through exploitation and people laboring in conditions all over the world to get the food we need, the clothes we wear, the pens we use, the microphones. All of this is created through global networks of production. And that all of our cultures, all of our ways of living, all of our ways of relating grow out of and have to reflect and more or less correspond to that. And so when we live in a society where the exploitation and oppression of black people has been woven into that mode of production all the way down to today, it leads to the culture and the society and the kind of police terror that we have today. That's applying science to a social contradiction. And so that's one example. There was other questions he raised. You want to say something?
Yeah, and an unscientific approach to society would say, look, here in America, we're all a bunch of individuals. You know, there's some social mobility. It's not like under feudalism, right, where, you know, you're born, you're a peasant, you're born a peasant, you die a peasant, or you're born a noble. Under capitalism, there's a little bit of social mobility. So, hey, Jay-Z, you know, he made it. He's a billionaire, so therefore, in America, anyone can make it. No, that would be and this is some great victory for black people, right? Jay-Z, a great victory for black people. Big Pimpin', that's a great role model for oppressed people. You know, this is how they fool you. This is how they fool you in this society. You know, they say, oh, in America, anyone can make it. This system is grinding up the lives of the masses of people. It's a capitalist system with white supremacy built into it. The masses of people are having their lives terrorized and ground up here, and even more so all over the world. And yet they hold up these few individuals who make it and say, look, in America, anyone can make it. And then they use that to say, oh, if you didn't make it, it's your own fault. And this is how people like Jay-Z, and she gave the example of Barack Obama, this is how they get used. In some ways, Obama was worse for black people than George Bush was. Obama got up there and said, and on Father's Day, and blamed black people for not pulling up their pants and being absent fathers. You know, he got up there after the police broke Freddie Gray's neck in Baltimore and called the people who stood up, in the streets, he called them thugs. Imagine if Bush had done that. Imagine if Trump had done that. Everyone would say, it's a fucking racist ass thing to say, but Obama could get away with it. See, this is how they use people like this. And if you're putting forward these people as models and examples, anyone can make it, then you're getting played by the system and you're taking an unscientific approach. Okay. So we're going to play a bit more of the question and answer in a minute. But before we get to that, I want to stay on this question of science for a minute because, it's so central to whether or not people are going to be able to understand the world and radically change it. And it's also, right at the core of the new communism that Bob Avakian has developed, but it's also something that's so widely misunderstood, not just by this student, but by the millions of people who need to be part of this revolution. So we want to play a very relevant section from the interview that Bob Avakian did last fall. So let's watch.
I think it would be really helpful for our audience to hear from you a very basic understanding of what is science and why is it so important when, particularly at a time when so many people, including among the oppressed, are, oh, science, I'm not going to get vaccinated, I'm not going to do any of this, who knows what this is all about. So I think it's very important for people to understand what it, in its essence, actually is.
Look, science, there's an interview with Ardea Skybreak, Science and Revolution, and she makes a point and emphasizes it. Science is an evidence-based process. You go by you interact with the larger reality. You gather evidence and facts about what that shows, what comes forward, what the evidence is about different phenomena, different parts of reality. And then that's the raw material from which you then look to see what are the patterns in that reality, what might be superficial, what's deeper, what are the underlying causes of it. You have to go to work to do that. And then you analyze that and then you synthesize it. You draw together the essential things that you can learn from that about the patterns in reality and underlying driving forces in reality. That's what science does in any particular. It's just a way of engaging and learning from reality by applying the method of analyzing what you're learning from interacting with reality and then drawing together the key things to get to the core, the essence of what that shows. And this is in whether it's medicine or any other physics, biology, archaeology, any other sphere of science. This is what people who are applying the scientific method are doing. And a lot of people these days are anti-scientific and they don't want to hear about science because, well, some things have been really terrible things have been done in the sphere of medicine, like the Tuskegee experiment, where they let black people who had syphilis just suffer from it to see what would happen. And there have been other things, of that sort. But Skybreak also makes the point that is bad science. Mm-hmm. And you can use the good science, the actual scientific method that I was just speaking to actually learn about reality and to refute the bad science. And some people say, and it's understandable, people say, especially people who are oppressed, well, they've lied to us about everything. They lie to us, about the history of the country. They lie to us about the present reality of the country. They lie to us about how people are treated in this country now. They just lie. So why should we believe anything they say? And the answer to that is you shouldn't believe anything they say, quote unquote, but you should apply the scientific method to actually investigate reality and then do the work to determine what that actually shows. And for example, vaccines. All right, yes, it's true. The ruling class, down through history here in this country and other places, carried out terrible things in the name of science, including medical science. But then if you analyze further, do you really think, for example, the ruling class of this country wants total chaos where everybody is so sick that they can't even go to work, that the economy breaks down, that they're weakened in the international arena where they're contending with other imperialists like Russia and China, but more to the point, look at the actual evidence. Millions of people have gotten vaccines. There are almost no serious side effects from all this. Look at the actual evidence. Don't look at what somebody says on the social media. I mean, you can look at it, but then compare it to reality. Mm-hmm. Look at the actual evidence about, that's how you know. Kyrie Irving and apparently Shaquille O'Neal and some of these other fools talking about how the world is flat. Well, look at the evidence. Is there any evidence to show that the earth is not flat, that it's actually round? There's plenty of scientific evidence. You can look into it yourself and you can determine for yourself what's true. And that's what the scientific method is. And everybody, not just scientists, but everybody when they're dealing not only with natural phenomena such as hurricanes, are hurricanes, do they occur because God wants to punish America because it's letting gay people have rights? That's what Christian fundamentalists say. Is that the truth? Or do hurricanes happen because a whole bunch of people in Philadelphia sneezed at the same time? Or is there actually some real causes of hurricanes? What are they? Look into it. Determine for yourself what the evidence shows on the basis of actually rationally engaging reality and looking at it and then synthesizing the evidence. Yes, the earth is actually round. I mean, I don't know if he's joking or not, but I read a statement by Shaquille O'Neal where he said, well, I've flown from one part of the world to another and I never tipped over, so how could it be round? I mean, I'm sorry, but first of all, Shaquille O'Neal's a pig anyway, and proud of it. If you don't believe me, go check it out. He brags about how he went on raids with the drug administration and stuck some drug dealer's or alleged drug dealer's face down in the toilet. So, I don't have anything good to say about Shaquille O'Neal to begin with. But this is a world-class level of ignorance to talk about that. I mean, if you put an ant on a basketball and it goes around the basketball, it's not going to flip over, okay? And the same thing is true with the big sphere of the earth compared to a tiny airplane, okay? The airplane goes around like an ant going around a basketball. You're not going to flip over just because it's round, okay? I mean, but don't take my word for it. Go do some work. That's one of the things we talk about in the culture, the lack of curiosity, just laziness. People not really wanting to do, don't want to read a book, don't want to learn about history. Okay, maybe I'm overstating, it's not everybody, but it's way too much a phenomenon in the culture. The lack of curiosity, it's one of the striking things. How are you ever going to bring into being a better world if you're not curious, including about the way the world is and why it's the way it is? So, do some work. This is work anybody can do. Anybody can look into the evidence. Anybody can apply the scientific method to determine what's true. And that's what people need to do. I've said it before. Don't believe anything on faith. But go by the evidence. Go by the scientific method to determine what's actually true and not what's a bunch of bullshit that some people put out there, to try to mislead you, or because they themselves are misled. And may make you feel good for a little while, but it isn't going to change anything that makes you feel bad.
So we want to show just one more portion from the Q&A with you tonight, which really brought alive the stakes of the current moment.
Yes, I appreciate the meeting today. My question is, Speaker, considering the current living conditions many Americans endure and the disregard by the current Biden administration, such as inflation, housing, gas, and food, all while sending $80 billion to fund a war 5,000 miles away, that brings us closer to nuclear annihilation. And with the backing of figures like Bernie Sanders and Republican neocons like Lindsey Graham, Mike Pompeo, and Ron DeSantis, shouldn't the American people seriously consider seeking a 2024 election candidate who breaks free from the conventional Democrat and Republican status quo? After all, we need to stop nuclear escalation, give power to a movement by and for the working American people, and who are against the elites. A movement so vocal against the ruling class that they are enemy public number one for the CIA and FBI. What if I told you that this movement, this revolution, is the MAGA movement?
I would tell you that you're very wrong. Look, you can list, I'll tell you, you can list 1,001 things wrong with Biden. I mean, 1996 crime bill that is part of the mass incarceration. The fact that he is taking us and playing nuclear brinksmanship with Russia in Ukraine and moving us closer to war with China. You can name a million things wrong with Biden, and it will not make that white supremacist, fascist feces, Donald Trump, a hero of the people. Yes. Okay? Donald Trump, who has said, and people have to take this seriously, this is a bunch of, he has said, I'm running for, first of all, they staged a coup attempt. And you know what a failed coup attempt is? It is a dress rehearsal. And very few of them face serious charges, and most of the people who stood up against that have now been purged from the Republican Party. And when Donald Trump was at CNN town hall, he said, I will be your retribution. I'm coming back. I will be your retribution in 2024. He, again, refused to accept an election he loses, and he has a social base that is even more armed to the teeth, even more fanatical, even more ready to use violence to purge America of those they deem less than human. Donald Trump once again upheld ripping children from their parents' arms and caging them in that town hall. These are crimes against humanity, and they are being prepared in the offing right now. And the people in this country and all the decent people in this room better take note. When I say we need to make a choice because radical change is coming one way or the other, I'm not challenging you to step into the revolution as a lifestyle choice, as a timeless thing. Get into this because this is our thing. We need to build it up. We are moving in a very dangerous direction that this man just spoke about. MAGA. MAGA, the guy who said he wanted to take the troops and shoot protesters during Black Lives Matter. MAGA. With the Republican Abbott governor in Texas, who just pardoned a guy who shot and killed and was convicted of murder for killing somebody who stood up in the Black Lives Matter protest, convicted in a Texas court of murder. And he said, I'm going to pardon you, giving the green light to that kind of slaughter. This is what one half the country is preparing for. And the other half the country, and this is why we have to struggle against this woke shit, is caught up canceling each other over pronouns, obsessing with their feelings and their identities, and seeking safe spaces and trigger warnings, which are bullshit. There is no safe space in a nuclear war. There is no safe space in a fascist America, and there is no safe space for most people on this planet today. So I'm challenging those of you who are not deluded into MAGA bullshit to actually step into the revolution and spread this revolution. Get organized with this now while we still have a chance, while we have an opportunity to wrench this in a different direction. I'm putting that challenge very much to all of you who are still sorting out your thinking, to sign up tonight, to get organized with us, to get into this We Are the RevCom statement, to spread it, to join the Revolution Club, to join this tour and help spread this tour, because we have to wake up so many others in this country who are sleeping through this right now. So this last question should really bring us back to the stakes of this moment. With the MAGA fascists mobilized and way too many of the decent people caught up and intimidated by woke folk and identity politics hustlers. And the way that we cut through this in this program on one campus is very significant, but this needs to radiate in society right now, and urgently, because we are in a time of convulsive change that is headed right now, accelerated in an accelerated fashion towards a really, really horrific future. But there's also potential to wrench a revolution out of this. And this campaign, taking on woke, waking up a new generation and winning them to revolution and to science and rationality, and to debate that out, is a crucial part of making this revolution in this rare time. This is what Bob Avakian has charted and the roadmap he's laid out. And this is what we're fighting to apply in this tour. And so we want to really call on you to step into this. We can't spread this without your involvement. To the campuses, into the intellectual life of this country. We have big plans. We want to ask you to tune in this Sunday. Once again, tune in this Sunday to the live stream, to the fundraising live stream, June 4th. where we're going to be on. We're going to be talking about this. You're going to hear more about the rest of the work the Revolution is doing, and you're going to find the ways to donate and help raise money for this tour to get out.
Yeah, it is so important because this event at UCLA, was really significant, but it was really just the beginning. So all of you watching this have, a big role to play in, spreading this event far and wide. Spread the last episode of the RNL show where you can watch Sunsara's speech. Send that to everyone you know. This show as well with the question and answer sessions. And in the upcoming episodes, we're going to be playing more of these questions and answers. And go to revcom.us, where you can actually get into the work of Bob Avakian, get deeper into these questions on, he's done so much work over years on the question of woke identity politics, the philosophy behind it, the politics, the morality of this cancel culture, all that. Get into it at revcom.us and, contact us, email us, and be part of bringing this tour, the speaking tour, to your campus. Or if you're a student or a professor, or if you're not, help open up doors so that can happen. And definitely, whatever you do, tune in this Sunday to the live stream. You'll learn more about this whole initiative, and you can be part of donating to it too.